Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to uncover the incredibly fascinating and, frankly, completely hidden origins behind the cultural traditions that you and I interact with every single year. We're going to look at how the very fabric of American culture was woven together by a single brilliant mind that history has somehow largely overlooked.
Ask yourself, who do you think is actually responsible for creating the national Thanksgiving holiday we celebrate today? When you sit down for that massive turkey dinner, whose vision are you actually living out? You might assume it was just a natural evolution from the Pilgrims, or, I don't know, maybe a quick political decision by a president. But the truth, it's far more intentional than that.
And hey, while we're at it, who popularized the idea that brides should wear white, or that we should drag pine trees into our living rooms and decorate them at Christmas? Because before the mid-19th century, brides wore dresses of all different colors, and Christmas trees, definitely not a standard American staple. So how on earth did these become the absolute standard for our everyday lives?
Section 1. The Hidden Cultural Architect.
Well, it turns out these massive cultural touchstones were all popularized by one incredibly influential, yet largely forgotten woman. We constantly hear about the political titans of the 19th century, right? But the architect of our domestic and cultural lives operated entirely from behind an editor's desk. Meet Sarah Josepha Hale. Dr. Andrew Roth, a Jefferson scholar in residence, identifies her as the most influential woman of mid-19th century America. She was literally a one-woman cultural revolution who orchestrated the making of the modern American woman. She proudly went by the title editress, and through her massive publishing platform, she absolutely dictated the tastes, morals, and traditions of a rapidly growing nation.
Section 2. Shaping American Traditions. Operating straight from that editor's desk, Hale didn't just report on culture, she engineered it. She used her magazines to knit together a shared identity for a deeply, deeply divided country. Just looking at this timeline, her career milestones are staggering. In 1827, she published her novel Northwood, which totally launched her into the public eye. By 1828, she was running the Ladies' Magazine in Boston, which was the very first periodical exclusively devoted to women in America. In 1837, she took over the literary department of Godey's Ladies' Book in Philadelphia. And this whole journey culminates in her successful 1863 campaign, right in the thick of the Civil War, mind you, to have Abraham Lincoln officially declare Thanksgiving a national holiday. At the helm of Godey's Ladies' Book, she created an absolute powerhouse of a publication. To put it in modern terms, imagine taking Martha Stewart's Living, Good Housekeeping, Oprah's Magazine, and The New Yorker, and just smashing them all together into one definitive guide. It had the whole shebang: high fashion, daily recipes, housekeeping advice, and cutting-edge literature from America's leading authors. When she saw Queen Victoria wear a white wedding gown, Hale promoted the idea in America, and boom, it became the standard. She did the exact same thing with the Christmas tree to create a shared, unified American Christmas experience.
And this next point really highlights her absolute dedication. She campaigned relentlessly for over 35 years just to establish Thanksgiving as a unified national holiday. Just think about that level of perseverance for a second. 3.5 decades of writing editorials, lobbying politicians, and penning personal letters to 5 different U.S. presidents before Abraham Lincoln finally agreed. She did all of this because she deeply believed America needed a shared day of cultural unity to heal its fractures.
Section 3. Champion for Women's Rights. Now, it's super easy to look at a 19th century women's magazine and write it off as purely domestic, right? But Hale actually used that domestic focus as a Trojan horse to advance incredibly progressive ideas for her time. Dr. Roth notes that her accomplishments kind of fall into 2 contrasting baskets. On one hand, you have her role in unifying American culture, creating holidays and heavily promoting American writers over foreign imports to build a distinct national voice. But on the other hand, we see what might be her greatest accomplishment: her fierce, decades-long advocacy for women's equal education, the right to work and get equal pay, and crucially, the right to own and manage their own property. As we look at her advocacy, we're reminded of this really powerful truth from Dr. Gerda Lerner, who is quoted in the source material. Women's history is women's right, an essential, indispensable heritage from which we can draw pride, comfort, courage, and long-range vision. Sarah Josepha Hale embodies that courage and long-range vision perfectly. She was literally fighting for structural societal changes while simultaneously teaching the entire nation how to roast a turkey.
Section 4. The Editress and Author.
Okay, so what's truly incredible here is the personal tragedy that launched her entire literary career in the first place. She didn't exactly set out to become a national icon. She was forced into the public sphere by incredibly difficult circumstances.
Looking at this 1853 scan of her massive work, Woman's Record, we find her autobiographical notes. She reveals she was tragically widowed when her husband, a young lawyer named David Hale, passed away. She was suddenly left as the sole protector of 5 young children, with the oldest being only 7. She explicitly states that she entered the literary profession simply hoping to gain the means to support and educate her kids. Her entire empire was born out of a mother's absolute necessity to survive.
So you might be wondering, how did she develop this remarkable intellect? She didn't have a formal college education. Women at the time largely couldn't. Instead, she deeply credited her late husband. She wrote that soon after they got married, they started this system of study, spending 2 hours every single evening from 8 to 10, reading and learning together. She noted his aim was always to enlighten my reason, strengthen my judgment, and give me confidence in my own powers of mind. That nightly dedication gave her the intellectual foundation to later lead the entire country's literary conversation.
And her literary genius wasn't just in editing, it really shines in her own poetry too, like The Hand in Its Work. In this poem, she beautifully articulates her philosophy on the gender roles of her era. She writes about how man's hand builds the physical world, the pyramids, the engines, the ships. But she counters that a woman's warm heart and gentle hand are part of God's eternal plan to soften, soothe, and refine man, ruling him as the angels rule, by deeds of peace and love.
Her overall output as an author was just staggering. Way beyond the magazines, she wrote acclaimed novels like Northwood, which was so popular it was even reprinted in London. She compiled the massive Woman's Record, documenting distinguished women throughout history. And she wrote deeply empathetic poetry like It Snows, which brilliantly contrasts the joy a schoolboy feels playing in the snow with the sheer terror a poor widow feels facing the freezing cold without firewood. Her writing consistently forced her audience to look way beyond their own everyday experiences.
Section 5. A Lasting American Legacy.
So what does this all mean for us today? The crucial point we arrive at is the true, invisible scale of her legacy. We are walking around in a culture largely designed by someone whose name we almost never say. While names like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucretia Mott absolutely and rightfully dominate our history books when we talk about the 19th century, Sarah Josepha Hale was the true everyday architect of the modern American woman. She used her massive platform not just to dictate what was on the dinner table, but to quietly, persistently demand that the women sitting at that table had the right to own property, the right to equal pay, and the right to a proper education.
Knowing that the mastermind behind our Thanksgiving dinners, our Christmas trees, and our white weddings was nearly lost to history leaves us with a truly fascinating, provocative thought. If the architect of so much of our shared American culture was just hiding in plain sight in the pages of a 19th-century ladies' magazine, what other everyday traditions, the things you and I do without even thinking, were actually shaped by forgotten women? Take a look around your life today. You might just be living in someone else's quiet revolution.